Thank you. All right. So today I'm going to talk about Salesforce Flow design pattern. So how many of you has used Salesforce Flow in the past? All right, Mohammed Nawed is saying he has used Salesforce Flows. I'm seeing some familiar name here. Awesome, awesome. Before that, thanks to our sponsor, without them, it was not possible to bring such an amazing events to alive. And thanks for all organizers as well. So, hey, my name is Rakesh Gupta. I'm a senior solution architect at IBM, Salesforce MVP, and blogger at automationchampion.com. You can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Rakesh Storm. So the journey from workflow, I don't know how many of you has worked on the workflow rule process builder and then migrated to Salesforce flows. We have anyone in the room who has started from sales workflow rule, then migrated to process builder, and then Salesforce flows? If yes, type your name, type your answer in the chat. Oh, wow. So I started my career around 10 to 12 years back. So when we had only workflow rule or Apex Trigger, and then Salesforce launched Process Builder, and then now we 100% migrated to Salesforce flows. That's why I say flow is urgent. Now in the flows the flow comes with a different flavor. So there are different flows versions. We have a screen flow that can be used to take user interactions, user input, and then you can perform some operations. For an example, you have a data table which allow user to select some records and then they can perform or mass update. Whereas record trigger flow is some more or less equivalent to the process builder or workflow rules, which works behind the scene and do the automations. Whereas a schedule trigger flow fire on schedule time. It can fire on daily, weekly, monthly, or if you fire on every hours in within a few minutes, then you can install an Apex Change package which can do that, and it is equivalent to Salesforce schedule job. Whereas platform event is another way to launch a flow. You can publish a platform event and make your transaction a sequential, and then auto launch flow, which is equivalent to your Apex class. It can do the reusable concept. So now for an example, so if you create one thing again and again from different flows, so it is better to have a reusable code that you can call from many places. For an example, so once an opportunity is closed won, you want to create a task and notify to Slack user on Slack. So now, and same thing you can do on the when an account gets created or a case is assigned. You want to create a task and notify user on Slack. So this is common, very common task. So you don't want to write same logic again and again in multiple places. So what you can do is you can create an auto launch flow which you can call from different places and pass parameters. And there are other flows as well. You have a flow orchestrator, we have omni-channel flows, and there are also other flows. And Salesforce also provide a template as a starting point, so you can use that and build your flows. Now I will share my 10 tips which help you to become automation expert. So how many of you have created a process flow diagram before writing an Apex code or before creating a Salesforce flows? Type your answer in the chat. Have you ever created a process flow diagram or any design thinking before writing any code or before like creating any flows? Okay, so Ines is saying she has. Oh wow. Anyone else? So the first thing is always plan before you build. So I have lots of people every day reach out to me for asking help in Salesforce flows. And one of the common things that I notice is people don't think what they are building. So first, take a minute pause. Whenever you have a use case, Take a minute to pause. You don't have to build everything right away. Think about what you want to build. Do you have a clear cut understanding how your logic should process? Either you don't have to become a master of creating a process flow diagram. You can use pseudocode, or you can write a plain English, which can help you to break down your logic. For an example, if I have this requirement, which is basically whenever a user have a screen where user can add a users new users and add them into the public group. So now if I started blindly without thinking, I may stuck in between because I never think about how this logic flows. So when users select what I want to display them, do I want to just allow them to add user into public groups queues, so allow them to select a permission set they want to assign it to new users, or what else? So this is the first step. So I always create a process flow diagram before writing anything. Second, you have to also understand data model, because now if you take this example, we are touching lots of objects. We are using user object, we are using group membership, we are using permission set, we are using permission set assignment. Now if you don't understand this object and how these objects are connected with each other, you may not able to write queries, which is basically get element, or create or update elements. So when you write a get element or as equivalent to SQL queries, you have to understand what you are querying. Like for example, when you insert a record in the permission set assignment group, it takes two parameters, user ID and permission set ID. And now how I get the permission set ID? So this you have to write first. You have to think about, okay, so now if I want to create a permission set assignment, I need a permission set ID. And when users select a permission set, I will get the permission set ID or permission set name, and then I can query. So this is the very first step. Now, a flow is not answer for each and everything. I have seen people like they are writing validations rule, they're writing lots of things. So something that can be easily achievable using a formula fill or report. People are still writing flows. Like for an example, if you are on the opportunity and you want to bring account site from account, which is a parent, you don't have to write a flows for it. You can use a simple formula field. That's all you need. Is you don't have to write each and everything or solve each and every requirement using a Salesforce flows. How many have you have done these mistakes? I have done this mistake in very early stage of my career. So yeah, there are lots of things you can better handle through the Apex trigger. So like for an example, if someone uploaded an attachment or files, you want to write an automations. That's the example of using an Apex trigger. You don't have to go and write those into hacky way using Salesforce flows, because Salesforce record trigger flow does not support uh, content document object, but you can able to hack it. But that's a better example of using Apex trigger. Or if you want to make your transaction asynchronous, platform event is the right way to do that. You can, if you want to chain your transaction one after another, but don't create a Salesforce flow for each and every requirement. And let me say, okay. Meanwhile, I am going to share the attendees URL here, so you can fill these forms at the end of the sessions. I will run a referral and you will get a chance to win prize. So I have shared the URL in the chat. Now, build in sandbox. So have you ever built a flow process builder directly in the in productions? If yes, type your name in the chat. And you are not alone. I have done when I was working for a small company, a small client. I've done this many times. So okay. So the first thing is, if you are building this logic, as Salesforce does not stop you to create or update a flows, a process builder, a validations rule, these things in the productions. So many of like me, people like me, has done this mistakes and creating this in the production. So one of the scenario that I can share is a couple of years back when I was working with financial firms, a director asked me, "Hey, can you do a modification on this flow so that when user account is active, we will trigger an email and DocuSign?" And I directly did that flow changes in the production. And what happened is an account get deactivated and it trigger a DocuSign email. So that was my mistake. So what I learned is don't do all these changes, even though it is small. We are working with the real life data, and it may trigger an email which does not sound good to the client. You may update or corrupt the data because you don't have a copy or backup of your data. If the data get manipulated or data get deleted or something happened to the data, or you create a couple of new records, so it is better to do all these changes in the production, not in the productions, do in the sandbox. Second, always write test classes. I have you anyone in this call have written any test classes for flows? So write that test classes for the flow. It will help you to understand whether your flow is bulkified or not. So sometimes we write flows and we never think about the bulkification. So when you write a Apex test class and pass the record, at least 100 record or 200 record, then you will able to understand whether your flow will work in the bulkification situations or not. Some people I have seen, they write the SQL query within a loop or put the DML statement inside the loop, which is not a best practices. If you are on a small business, it may work, but that's a place where you have to write a test class to test your flow to make sure that it will work in the bulk situations. Now, so how many flows you guys are creating on a given object? Anyone that wants to write answers? So do you create one flow per object or you create as many as flow uh, on a given object? Okay, so Ali is saying he is creating one. Type your answer. Okay, Hassan is saying one per object. Okay, so yeah, there is Salesforce is not going to restrict, and with order of executions that Salesforce put in the flows, you can write which order the flow will fire. You can write as many as flow, but when it's come to debugging, when it's come to managing, it's gonna be a burden for you. So I prefer to have one flow per object. So when I say one flow per object means you have to have one before say flow, one after say flow, and one delete flows, and then have subflow, which is an auto launch flow, and call that auto launch flow from anywhere you like. So this approach will help you to maintain a bare minimum flows, but don't try to create more flow for each a new flow for each and every requirement. So for example, if you get a new requirement, don't try to create, try to see if that can handle through there is any logic in existing flow somewhere that you can handle. If not, then think about why not you can use an existing flow to manage it, why you create and what benefit you are getting by creating a new flows. And if you have this approach where you have three handler uh, and three flows, that would be good. So you can, if you have any logic, what you can do is you can write that logic in a subflows, which is an auto launch flow, and then auto launch flow is calling by record trigger flows. So that can make your life easier. And by doing this, so now what happens is if you're working on enterprise and you have bigger team to handle, so everyone can work on their assignment because a record trigger flow is not changed. It's only the subflow that is interacting. And if you have multiple subflows, you can assign activities to your team members and they can work on their subflows. And you can also use invocable apex as needed. So one of the things that I don't write or do in my flows, I never write an entry criteria, and I always use a decision element to handle or check the required use case or requirement. Like for example, in this scenario, so billing country equals to India. So what I do is I don't write this in entry criteria, and I use a decision element and go in the decision element and check. If billing country is India, go further, otherwise stop it. So how many of you have ever used this approach? So do you write the entry criteria or you use a decision element or some other approach to? All right. Now, if we there are lots of tricks, tips and tricks that you can make your flow more manageable. Like for an example, so if you are working on a flow and you want to have a different path, how do you do that? For example, if record is created, I want to have a new path, and if record is updated, I want to have another path. So what you can do is you can use formula, and formula is very, very powerful. If you use formula, it can help you to reduce your number of elements in the flow. So I have, for one community member in the couple of years back, I helped them to reduce their 40 elements to 8 or 9 elements, and I have lots of such examples. So in this scenario, so if you look at here, so I use a formula is new. And what in the decision element, what I does it basically checking if it is true, so go to the new path, and if it's sold, go to the old path. Likewise, you can also use the formula in the update statement. Like for example, if you want to update the opportunity and stage, and based on certain criteria, so to update the stage, don't directly select the values. So you can write a formula, and in the formula, you can write the different conditions rather than using a decision element. Say, hey, opportunity is lost. So, or if amount is greater than $10,000, do set opportunity stage is this. If amount is greater than 10,000, less than a million, set this stage. Just an example. Or greater than 1 million, set this stage. So writing three different decision element, what you can do is you can create a formula, and you can say if amount is greater than this, stays gonna be this. If amount is greater than this and less than this, it stays gonna be this. So it will help you to reduce number of elements. Like in this example, so if you look at this example here, this is the one decision element, and it has three different assignment element. And this different assignment element basically update opportunity, close date, and next step. That's all. So there is a current stage, and you check the current stage. If it's a loss, won, and open. If it is one of them, so I have different logics to update. Now, how to handle this is remove all this. I don't want to add a decision element here. I don't want to have anything here. So what I do is I simply use an assignment element. And in the right hand side, I select the fields which I want to update. And in the left hand side, I create a formula. Like you can see the formula here. This is just an example. If the record stage name is equal to close one, I want to use close date. Otherwise, keep the close date. So you can able to write this nested if statement. Say that if stage is lost, I want to have this value. Else, if stage is won, I want to have this. Otherwise, keep what value you have, or you want to write further logic using the formula. And if you see here, I have earlier 4 element in my flows. Now I have only 1 element in my flows. Now build reusable flows. Don't write same logic 5 different times. It's not manageable. So if I'm writing same logic 5 different times and business asks me to update or modify, imagine how many places you have to go. And sometimes what happens is as a consultant, we build the flow, we build the project and deliver it to the client, and now client is going to handle. And imagine if client does not know lots of things about the flows, how many places they are going to do, or another consultant. So it's better to document it, write down some description in each and every element, and write down your Azure or Jira or ServiceNow ticket number, so that if someone wants to go back and look at what you have done, they can do that. As well as don't try to create so many put same logic in multiple places. So use subflows. That is basically an auto launch flow. So create an auto launch flow with the lots of variables, and then you can pass the variable values from any places. Like for an example here, if if you are creating a task and you create a flow, so now what happen is task due date can be today plus 10 days, today plus 15 days. So you can create that as a variables and pass that variables value from any calling flow. So you don't have to uh, set the task due date today plus 10 days. You can set it today plus 10 days plus today's plus 15 days. Now, Apex. Flow is awesome, but flow is not solution for each and every scenarios. There are lots of scenarios you have to use Apex code. One of the example was in. Now, in with Winter 23 release, Salesforce now launching in a query. So if you familiar with Apex code, so you can say that, hey, give me all opportunity where ID in a list of IDs. That is not possible until Winter 23 release. So you have to use an Apex code where you can pass opportunity a list of IDs, account IDs, and you can say, okay, give me all opportunities for this account ID. Now it is possible after Winter 23 release when it hit your org. Another example is I want to auto create a code PDF. So if you work on the code, Salesforce has a code template, and then you can click on the button, it create a code PDF. Now what I want is as soon as code get drafted, I want to create a PDF. Now, you cannot do this via flows because flow does not have any way to handle it. So you have to use an Apex code to do so. So Apex code, what you can do is you can call the invocable Apex from your flows, and Apex can create a PDF and attach the PDF to the code. So there are another situations as well that you have to use invocable Apex. Remember, there's only one invocable Apex per Apex class. And you can have your Apex defined inputs, primitive data types, as object, and others. Next, do not hard code ID. So there are some situations where we want to hard code ID. For example, initially, if you want to assign a record to some queues, this is a very common example. So we want to assign record to queues or users. So what we do is we hard code the ID, or we say that, hey, if opportunity is this, send it to this queue or this user. So do not do all this. There are some situations where we want to assign record based on some criteria. So for example, if I say, hey, if opportunities belong to India, assign to this people. If a record belongs to Pakistan, assign it to this people, and so on. So don't try to write lots of decision element in your flows or hard code the values. It's very simple. Create a custom metadata types, and you can have all the combination in custom metadata types. Like for example, here I'm saying, hey, this is approval matrix, and if lead source is this and type is this, I'm assigning to this opportunity ID. And here you can hard code, and then what happen is this is one-time data migration. So when you migrate this things changes to production or any other org, you can replace this. And what you can do is, now if you look at the second example screenshot here, I'm querying the record. I'm saying, hey, this is my type and this is my source. So can you give me the opportunity approver, and then I can use it. So this is more manageable than you can write all these conditions in flows. And imagine how many conditions you're going to have in your flows. You can also use custom labels to store some values, or you can use custom object, but custom metadata types is the right way to store any hard-coded value that you have or any configurations, and you can directly call in your flows by querying it. Next, always have a fault element in your flow. So for example, if you have any DML operations in your flows, make sure that you have fault element. So fault element is basically when this path, this element, when Salesforce is running this flow and it fails here for any region like validation flow data or any other region. So you receive an emails, but if you're working on enterprise, there are so many emails. I never look into this. So what I do is I have a platform event and I publish a message, and that platform event is listened by IT team using their different applications. There are different applications in the market that they can watch and automatically detect whether a ServiceNow, Azure DevOps, or Jira ticket is needed or not. So what I do is I publish a platform event with relevant message. Is it basically information only? It is basically action needed, or what failed here? Kind of information, and then IT team basically look into it and say, okay, so if they have to take any actions, create a ticket. If not, that's okay. And you can create a subflow as well. If you look at here, I have email notifications, but in actual project I use a platform event, which is error handling, and publish all these messages that can be uh, handled by IT team. Or you can also send an email as well to yourself if you're working on a small medium projects, so where you receive an email and you can check if you want to take any actions or not. But this is very very helpful to manage, because sometimes if flow failed and you don't have any information, it's gonna be hard for you to investigate. Then you have to recreate some that situations and try to find out what problem happened in the past. Last but not least, if your flow failed, don't worry. It's happened with everyone. It's if you're a developer or you're admin, don't worry, because it's a everyday activities. So if you know how to debug it, so there are two ways you can debug a flows. You can use on screen debugging, which is basically a button. You can go to the click on it, and you can enter the data and click on the debug, and Salesforce will show all the debug steps. Second, you can also use a debug log, which is basically best way to do debug it. Go to the setup, go to the debug log and set up a debug log for running user, either you or someone else. And once the user perform that operation, Salesforce capture entire activities. And what you have to do is you have to go, you can copy your flow element name where it failed and try to search based on the API name, and you can able to see if it's captured, and then try to understand why flow fails. Sometime common thing is you put the wrong ID, you did not pass right values, or maybe validations rule. Yes, okay. Yeah, so Joy is saying other may be considered using creating log file or whenever you're correct. Yep. So that helps. So use debug, don't worry. So debug log is the right way. And if you debug it 90% time, you can able to solve in within a 5 to 10 minutes if you read debug carefully. Bonus tips: do not put DML statement inside the loop. So sometime I have seen people putting this a DML statement inside the loop. So this will work. I'm not saying this won't work. But again, if you test the bulkification, it won't work, because here, if you see, it is creating, and Salesforce has 151 error. So as soon as you pass 150 elements, it will fail. Otherwise, what you have to do, the best practice is have a list here, create a data, like for example, if I'm creating an account or opportunity or task, have an S object, add all the values, and then add that S object into a list of task, list of account, and at the end of the flow, you can create the record instead of doing this. So this is the best way. So here it is taking only one DML operations, but if each records pass, like first record, it take one DML operations, second, two, three, four, five, and as soon as you pass 150 element, this flow fails. And here we are only taking one DML operations. So next, if you want to learn Salesforce flows and Apex Basic, these are the Trailhead module. I will share the link in the chat so you can go and read about Salesforce flows, design patterns, how you can design flow without limits. With that, thanks for joining. Let me share my screen and I can run Rafael. So